Have you played Redfall? Game of the Year 2023. No, it sucks. And no, I haven't played it, but I don't need to know that it's garbage.
Can they actually just not get around obstacles? That's wild. That's actually nutty.
Yet another symptom of the gaming industry being in a rough spot. And it's been for a while now. We've all seen the decline in quality from AAA developers over the years, but for me it feels as if the post-Battlefront 2 era, it has taken a steep nosedive. It's gotten even worse, somehow. And then a friend sent me this. It was just a Reddit screenshot. I don't have the link to the article and I couldn't find it as well. But if you do have it, please do share it in the comments. I'm really intrigued what it says. But it's not about the article, it's about the headline, because it made me think. Will there really be another video game crash? I think yes and no, depending on how you look at it. But before I get into that, let's start off with some lore, because some of you might not be familiar with the video game crash. And no, I'm not talking about blue screening mid-boss fight. I'm talking about a market crash. The video game crash was a market event that transpired in the early 80s. Back in the day when video games were the new kid on the block of the entertainment industry, things got to a booming start. Arcades were popping up everywhere and people would stand in line to play a game of Pac-Man or huddle around a single machine to witness some dude in a mullet beating the local high score. Now parallel to that, home consoles were also a growing market. With the release of the Magnavox Odyssey in the early 70s, it was the new trend and some people perceived it as just that, a trend or a fad. But nobody, even those people, could deny that it had some crazy amount of momentum, which drew the attention of a lot of people. Consumers, but also businesses. Video games got so popular that everybody wanted in on the hype and especially the money.
Hello, I like money.
Everybody and their grandma started making video games, and as a result the market got oversaturated and the quality of games steadily declined. Does this sound familiar? Yeah, trust me, I'm still talking about the early 80s. And this steady decline all culminated into the release of the E.T. game, which was one of the, if not the most anticipated game of 1982. It was developed by Atari for the Atari 2600 or the 2600 or the 2.6K, I don't know. But Atari fucked up. They gave the game designer a mere 5 weeks to produce the entire thing and they would overestimate their sales by a large margin. They wound up with millions of unsold cartridges and their name and game would forever be linked to their bankruptcy and the following video game crash of 1983. And that crash was bad. It wasn't just Atari that went down under. There were a lot of other companies that got hit pretty hard. To put in perspective, in 1983, the industry was worth an estimated $3.2 billion, but by 1985, that figure had dropped to $100 million. The confidence in the industry was gone from both consumer and investor side. There are some parallels to be drawn between the current state of affairs in the industry and the video game crash of 1983. But that doesn't mean that history will repeat itself. At least not in the exact same way. I mean, the industry got back up on their feet and they had their own little renaissance following the video game crash, with the coming of the NES to the Western Hemisphere, the PlayStation 1, and so forth. The good old times. Nostalgia. But since then, the video game industry has blown up out of proportion. It has gotten bigger and it has expanded into a lot more spheres than it used to do. Back then, the industry was a lot smaller and less segmented than it is right now. You had arcade gaming and you had console gaming, and that was about it. The only other division there was to be made was the region that you were looking at. Nowadays, there are a lot of splits to be made. For example, indie developers versus AAA developers, online multiplayer games versus single-player games, difference in platforms from consoles to PC to mobile, all kinds of different genres and subgenres, and there are probably a lot more divisions that I'm forgetting. So these industries aren't actually comparable at all anymore. You see, when we're talking about video games, especially here on YouTube and like for example Redfall, we usually tend to refer to AAA games, boxed games that you play on either console or a PC. And if we compare that scene directly to the scene of the video game industry in 1983, then you will be able to draw some parallels here. Seeing the current state of affairs, it is valid to speculate that that segment of the market will experience some kind of major decline or change in the coming years, seeing that the confidence and trust in that specific section has shriveled up like a nutsack in a snowstorm. And not just from consumer perspective, also possibly from investor perspective. I can imagine that you might be hesitant to drop in a lot of funds into big projects, seeing what happened with the launches of Battlefront 2 or Cyberpunk or No Man's Sky or Fallout 76 or now Redfall. But if we look at the mobile industry, that part doesn't show that kind of decline. This is probably due to the relative low cost of making a mobile game, combined with the free-to-play nature and maybe some lower expectations down the road. And if you put that together with the insane growth of the amount of mobile users in African and Asian countries, where for a lot of those people a phone is their only personal device to access the internet with, makes me all highly doubtful that any form of video game crash will drastically impact that segment of the market. Now let's break it down. According to Newzoo, this is the state of the video game market as of 2022. The total worth of the entire industry was an estimated 184.4 billion US dollars. 38.2 billion was comprised out of downloaded and boxed PC games. 51.8 billion dollars was from the console market, and a staggering 92.2 billion US dollars was allotted to the mobile section of the industry. 50%. So to me it seems that any form of video game crash will probably be confined to the PC and console market, the traditional gaming market, so to say, which is still a big market, don't get me wrong. It's still 30 times larger than the industry was in 1983, right before the collapse. But if things keep heading in the current direction, we might see it shrink significantly or change drastically over the next coming years. Investors will probably be inclined to reallocate their funds from the traditional segment of the market over to the mobile segment of the market, seeing that it is just that more profitable. But is this crash really coming, or has it already begun? Because we're already seeing the results of this. More and more developers adopt a more live service approach to their video games and their marketing. Some going free to play and then trying to sell you battle passes and microtransactions as you play, while others going even further, putting their game out as both a traditional game and a mobile game at the same time, for example Diablo Immortal and Fortnite. And I think that this might be the crash that we're looking at. Not necessarily a huge drop, a nosedive in the worth of the industry, but rather more of a shift in direction of the big corporations within the industry that we're already experiencing for years now. And even nowadays, when big companies attempt to make a good single-player game or an offline experience, it somehow tends to wind up in creating cookie-cutter bullshit or just a shitfest full of bugs. Mostly just to save time or just to get that release for the end of the quarter so they can appease their shareholders. And I think that that will only get more common in the coming years in the AAA sphere until the regular sales dwindle and they eventually shift their entire focus over to the mobile segment. Maybe, I don't know, I can see the future. I'm just speculating, man. So in short, no, the industry will not crash as a whole. But the traditional gaming experience, as in offline single player, no microtransaction, live service bullshit, is something that will become more and more rare among the AAA developer sphere. That or games that just simply have the balls to try something really new. That's also something that will get even more rare in the future from these big corporations. I mean, AAA developers just aren't keen on risking a lot of their funds on something that they know will not create as much revenue as FIFA Ultimate Team or something of that kind of caliber bullshit. But there is a glimmer of hope. Developing video games has never been as accessible as it is now, and with the advent of AI tools and new software like Unreal Engine 5, more and more indie developers will be able to make AAA standard games in terms of both quality and fidelity without having the need for an insane amount of external funding. And chances are that among those are some of the AAA developers and perhaps even studios of the future. But for now, we're gonna have to deal with this bullshit. So yeah, that was about it. Thanks for watching. Subscribe if you hate EA. Perhaps like the video, whatever. Dislike it. You do you. Bye.